Hi. Hi, Kiera. And
Ah,
hi, everyone. Y bienvenidos to our virtual author talk with Kiera Wright-Ruiz. My name is Mary, and I'm the Community Engagement Manager for Latinx Services with Pima County Public Library. I'm also the chair of the Nuestras, Raíces affinity team, which celebrates and honors the culture, voice, and linguistic heritage of our Latinx and Spanish-speaking communities of Pima County.
And hi, all. I'm Nikki Giamarco, and I'm a librarian at the Martha Cooper Library, and I'm the chair of the library's Biblio Lotus team. And Biblio Lotus supports and values the culture and voice of our Asian communities. And we're here today with Kiera Wright-Ruiz to discuss her work, yay, including her latest book, My Half Latinx Kitchen. Kiera's a writer and recipe developer, and she's written for publications like the New York Times, Food 52, Serious Eats, and The Kitchen. And her work explores the diversity of food and amplifies underrepresented communities. Her debut recipe book, My Half Latinx Kitchen, Half Recipes, Half Stories, All Latin America, was named one of the best cookbooks of the year by Bon Appetit magazine and the Washington Post. She's also the author of the picture book. It's a very adorable picture book. I Want to Be Spaghetti. When not writing, though, she is probably eating onigiri with her partner and dog somewhere in Tokyo, where she is currently based.
Today, we will be asking Kira a few questions about her work, and she'll be showing us how to make her mouth-watering Mexican hot chocolate cookie recipe, followed by some time for a Q&A with the audience. We want to begin today by sharing the library's land acknowledgement statement. The Pima County Public Library acknowledges the sovereignty of Native nations and acknowledges the 22 federally recognized indigenous tribes of the state of Arizona and those who inhabit Pima County. We honor the vast and often unrecognized contributions and sacrifices of indigenous people and are conscious of the ongoing experience of inequality and political invisibility. In partnership with Native nations, PCPL advocates for full access to its educational, informational, and recreational resources.
And if you haven't read My Half Latinx Kitchen, we recommend checking it out from the library. And by the way, I made a recipe for a potluck earlier this year. I made the garbanzos guisados from it. It was a really big hit. People loved it. It was super great as kind of like a winter for here anyway, stew that was super easy to make and delicious, and had lots of leftovers as well.
So we have a set of questions we'll begin with. You may use the reactions below, but please refrain from raising your hand. The audience will have an opportunity at the end to ask questions in the Q&A box below. Please be mindful that although this is a virtual event, you are entering a library space. So please be your beautiful and respectful selves as we dive into our event this afternoon. And now let's begin. For those listeners who are not familiar with your story, Kira, and have not had a chance to pick up your book, could you tell us a bit about yourself?
yeah, well, hi everyone. Thank you so much for joining and thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Yes, I'm Kira. It's currently morning in Tokyo, so if you see a lot of backlit light, it's because it's early in the day for me. Um, but yeah, so I wrote my Half Latinx cookbook. It came out last February. And for those unfamiliar with me and my work, I'm half Ecuadorian and half Korean. So my Half Latinx cookbook or kitchen really looks into just what it means as I've learned to embrace my Ecuadorian heritage, but also just how I feel as someone who's Latinx in general within the US, but also abroad. So the book actually, as I started writing it, because when I pitched it, I was actually living in Hawaii. So I've lived in Tokyo now for 4 years. And before this, I lived in Hawaii for 1 year. And then before that, I was in mainland US, mostly in New York. But I really wasn't expecting like the book to change shape the way it did. So at first when I pitched the book, I thought, oh, I want it to be like a chronicle of my life to kind of just show people that being Latinx isn't just one thing. Because often right now in food writing, even especially even more so before. Well, one, I guess way before there was just like very little representation of things outside of like a Eurocentric view of what food is, particularly from like a US lens. And it was really hard for me to find and relate about like who I am in works like more broadly. So it is, and like finally as things started to change, whether I saw like more different books from representing Latin American cuisines come out, I often saw them from like one lens of like when you're fully one ethnicity, and of course it's like not my story, but also I felt like within food writing sometimes, and of course like general media representation, when I did see someone of Latinx heritage, it just felt like very like a one box view of like what that meant. And I'm just not like that at all. And so the book itself explores what does it mean when you don't grow up in a traditional way. So of course, as I mentioned, I am Ecuadorian, but also like I didn't grow up with my family in the normal way. So I've had like many people help take care of me throughout my life. So the book is sort of outlined just to give it like some more anchor. Me starting as a kid, growing up with mostly Ecuadorian recipes. And then each chapter is kind of like an homage to different caretakers of mine who come from different ethnic backgrounds within Latin America. Whether that's my Ecuadorian grandpa, who's from Guayaquil, that a lot of the recipes are focused on seafood dishes and stews and things that are really celebrated within that coastal region of Ecuador. To my grandma, who's technically my step grandma, who's actually fully Mexican. So even though I'm not actually Mexican at all, I did grow up with a lot of Mexican influence in food because of her. And then it moves into, I was in foster care for like a year and a half. And so it showcases food from a Cuban foster mom and how I learned more about Cuban food in general, but also just part of my childhood was also just growing up in South Florida. So that influence was very like prevalent in my life. And then takes you to me being slightly more as an adult living in New York on my own as on just sort of as the first time, but it's also me hanging out with my aunt a lot, who's kind of like this amazing, like, even though I would love to say I'm the best home cook in my family, I'm simply not. She really is. And she used to own like a Peruvian restaurant in Miami and is just like such an expert in so many different kinds of cuisines. So I felt like from a culinary standpoint, it really helped round out the book, but also kind of further showed that you can learn more about a culture that isn't specifically just the one your blood is connected to, and how you can still feel part of something more broadly, and why that can be really beautiful on its own. And then it ends with me as an adult now living in Tokyo, navigating my like mixed heritage here, but also how that very much reaffirmed my American identity, which is not something at all I was expecting when I moved here, but definitely was not expecting the book to be kind of uh, such a way to like reflect on how these like Korean, Ecuadorian, American identity play into my view now. But I think it hopefully, spoiler alert, it has a nice end for it. But yeah, so that's a bit about the book and my journey with it.
That's so cool. And that's a great segue to my question, because I'm a Korean American adoptee, and reading about your mother was really interesting. And I related a lot to the issues of identity and as an adoptee, feeling disconnected from cultural traditions, especially with the cooking and the food area. Um, and you answered this, I think, in part when you were explaining your story, but how do you feel that your exploration of the various Mexican, Ecuadorian, Korean, and other Asian and Latinx dishes gave you deeper cultural connection? And what recipe from your book do you feel is the most personal?
Um, yeah, definitely a hard question because I feel like even, for example, like even me not living in Japan is a great example too, where I am learning so much about Japanese cuisine and history. And like, that's not directly related to me being Korean, but in many ways it also is because of like the history of colonization of obviously Japan being in Korea, but then also just knowing the diaspora of Koreans that have had a long, generations history within Japan as well. So I feel like even as I learn about one thing, you can kind of, I've been able to learn more about my Korean heritage too through that way. Also, I mean, specifically, I know we're getting a little off the Latinx side, but it's all mixed all together for me. Is the like looking at traditional Japanese dishes and seeing how the influence has spread so much in Korea, and learning how that dotted connection happened and formed has been like a very interesting experience. But a lot of it can also be said for Latinx cuisine too. Like I think a great example is like flan. So obviously flan has many broad roots actually, that goes back from like the Roman Empire. So like understanding, even though this history of this dish that's actually thousands of years old, how it spread through colonization within the Latin America has been really interesting to read about and learn. But also like the one flan dish I have is the pandan coconut flan, which is definitely not traditional, but is sort of my take on like what I want to eat and what I find fun for flan. Of course, like regular flan is also amazing, but I just wanted to add like a nice spin to it for, giving kind of like my food perspective. So I feel like even though, of course these cultures are so separate and so deep and rich with their own respective history, it's always interesting to learn how they play within how they kind of like communicate with each other, but also like within the US, since often people of different minorities are sort of grouped as these like one, main grouping, which of course is not the correct, and really flattens like these rich histories that go back thousands of years. It is, I feel like the sense of community when I meet someone else of Latinx descent within the US, just like I do if I meet someone of Asian descent in the US. Like we have this sort of shared experience to a point of how like the US treats us as one sort of grouping, even though of course our personal histories, of course, too, differ in so many ways. Um, but one of the I mean, I feel like every recipe is like a little personal in the book, of course. But one recipe that I really like is the seco de pollo recipe. So it's actually the second recipe in the book. Seco is this like cherished recipe stew that is really popular within Ecuador and also Peru. But it's made with like blended sofrito as the base, and you kind of let that fry and brown and get like really rich in flavor. And you add like chicken and beer, and it has crushed tomatoes in it. And basically, as you let it cook, of course, seco meaning dry. The stew is the complete opposite. It's like super juicy, very moist, for trigger warning for the word. But it's kind of like sort of a pun because as it cooks, the extra liquid evaporates. So you end up seeing the base of like the different textures of the sofrito. And you eat it kind of like with rice on the side. So you get like the nice brothy rice sort of combination. But yeah, that one is personal to me because it's just like one of the first Ecuadorian dishes I learned. It's actually the first Ecuadorian dish I learned to make. So it's something I felt really proud of to like be able to connect to my heritage from like a culinary perspective on my own. But it's something like I always, one, it's really easy to make even in Japan. I have like access to all the ingredients, but also when I want like chicken soup because I'm like, whether I'm sick or I'm feeling homesick or just need like an emotional pick me up, like that's what I go to.
Thank you, Kiera. At the end of your book, you say, "This book exists because of my dad's absence from my life." We often learn cultural knowledge and information from our parents. How were you able to reconnect with your Latinx roots without your father's presence in your life? And what advice would you have for people with similar stories and experiences?
Yes. Yeah, so like you'll read more about it in the book, but as I sort of lightly mentioned, I didn't really grow up with my dad for uh kind of stopped contact like completely when I was around like 12 or 11. And even then throughout my childhood it was like sporadic and not the best like situation for like a healthy stable household. But I mean, definitely something I realized with this book is like a lot of people have these sort of shared stories and experiences, whether it's with a parent or, with the friends, or other, people, family members. And, um, I'm not alone. And I don't think people who are going through something similar to that is alone. They're not alone either. But as I sort of touched on a little bit with on the first question, is like specifically with food, I feel like it's been really limited to this idea of when we talk about like a first generation American story of like food is passed down through the family with like typically the female matriarch in each family. So like the grandmother taught my mom and my mom taught me. And I really just wanted to challenge that idea because that is not, of course, how I grew up, but also that's not how everyone else grows up. And I think that, like, with my story, something I really wanted to do with this cookbook is push that narrative that, like, these other stories that exist within the margin exist and that are worthy, of a place on a shelf, just like any other book. But also, going back to the first part of the question of like how I learned about like my Latinx culture, you always have more perspective at the end than during the process. But I felt like growing up, there were ebbs and flows of how I felt about like my Ecuadorian heritage and identity. But I often felt like I wasn't a part of that community because like I don't speak Spanish fluently, and I felt like self-conscious of these things that are, what people typically connect with, fully knowing it about your cultural identity. But when I look back on it, and especially even as I touched on these like different caretakers, I was always learning about Latinx culture, even though it wasn't as obvious. Like whether I was at my grandparents' house, and there was just like a telenovela in the background, and just like hearing the drama of it, it's like that is such a core part of like a shared diasporic experience of what it means to be Latinx, and like understanding how newscasters like the flow of it in Spanish goes like there are these moments that I feel like are really true to many people's experiences. And yeah, it's not like one size fits all. And I think like my book really challenges what that means for me, but hopefully is a reflection of some other people's experiences too that they can see themselves in.
Thank you. Beautifully said. And as you mentioned in the first question, you know, there were different caretakers in your life and many who were Latinx. So in your book, you mentioned going home to learn the recipes and the stories for your cookbook. Can you tell us a bit about your experience about going home? And was there a specific moment when you knew you wanted to create this book?
Yeah. I guess I'll answer the second part first. So, I used to work at New York Times, cooking as a social editor. So I was constantly looking at recipes of like how to promote them on social and like, kind of the stories we were telling to the audience on like an external front. Um, and this is not like particularly directed at them. It's just like in general. Like I started noticing just like the lack of representation of Latinx food in media broadly. And at the time, Krishna's book Indianish just came out, and I think if you haven't read the book, I definitely recommend it. But Priya does such a beautiful job outlining what does it mean to have a first generation Indian experience within the U.S. and how that affects the plate. And her story is a lot more traditional than mine in terms of like she worked with her mom on it. But what is really cool is, to see, Indian food isn't just this one thing, it can be many things, and like how ingredients adapt, culinary traditions adapt within the US palate, whether she couldn't get the certain ingredients at home, but maybe she just likes grilled cheese, and like that plays a part of like how Indian influence comes into that dish for her sometimes. And it really just challenged this notion of like, what does it mean to celebrate foods from your culture in a way that felt very modern and fresh and different. So that book had just come out, and I just felt like so inspired by it because it felt like one of the first times that something could be different, and that would be okay. And so fresh off that, and Priya is like a close friend of mine that I have talked to a lot. Actually, she was one of the first people I talked to about this book idea. So like shout out to Priya. And I just thought that my story hadn't existed, and I felt like in terms of widespread media distribution for a cookbook, and well, I do have some of those themes of like making food, like playing up the fusion aspect of dishes and recipes. I also just think that from like a Latinx representation perspective, there is like plenty of room to play of like what that means, because like we deserve more than just like 5 cookbooks. And there's room for things to be creative and different and challenge what the norm is. But also there's such little representation of authors of multiple ethnicities. With food writing, there are some authors that do come from different backgrounds, but they are also half white and half insert whatever ethnicity here. But I didn't come from obviously that perspective. And I think like coming from 2 marginalized groups gave me like a different, my life is just different because of it. But also like the foods and like the things I'm interested in just, of course, have differed. So I think from that perspective, the book, just also hopefully offered value. And what was the first part of the question? Oh, learning with my family. Yeah. So one of the challenges of writing, there are so many challenges writing a Latin American cookbook in Tokyo. It's not maybe the first place I would recommend doing it if I had to recommend any place in the world. But one major thing is people don't really have ovens in their homes in Japan. So like the US traditional oven simply does not exist here unless you have it like custom sent over from the US and you have to like have a whole custom kitchen. I'll show you my little oven here. That's my little oven. That's more like a microwave. So that's like something you have to buy here. And that's where a lot of testing happened. But of course, like the oven just being different in size affects like cook times and just like how the hot air is circulating and things like that. So like even if I was testing stuff, I would have to get it retested by people in the US. But coming from Japan to the US, I think was really essential, not just for like a testing perspective and me developing recipes with like a US oven, and even cuts of meat are super different here because of it. Not just because of like the local palate of like what people prefer. It's like, oh, you don't actually need 3 racks of baby back ribs here because you don't have an oven. So they're not going to sell it at the grocery store, for example. So that's those sorts of cuts and things like that were like really helpful just to go back for. But as I mentioned, like in terms of my family, the chapters are with my grandpa, my grandma, and my aunts. And, I'm lucky that they're all right now still around, and really grateful to have been able to go back and just spend a bunch of time with all 3 of them. And it was actually the most time I've spent at home since I've like, moved away. I don't even know, a long time ago now. And it was just a really beautiful experience because, like a lot of home cooks, they don't have their recipes written down. But like my grandma's been making tamales for her whole entire life. And so she just doesn't measure anything. So like I would have to sit down with a notebook, and like every time she would like put something in, I would be writing out what she was doing. And I was like, wait, don't put the salt in yet. Like I actually have to measure it. She's like, what are you talking about? And I'm like, no. This is a recipe that people need to recreate. So I need to actually get this amount. Um, so yeah, like things like that was just really helpful to sit there and like write out things. But it was also really cool to see like my grandpa, who is like 95, who is not actively cooking in the kitchen now just because he's simply really old. But how because he knows these dishes so well because he's eaten them. And when he was cooking more when he was younger, he's made them so many times. He can just tell by sight just if something's off. So like as we were cooking like certain Ecuadorian stews, like he would just like kind of shuffle over into the kitchen and look into the pot, and he's like, "Oh no, it needs more time." Just because he's just is an expert in these dishes because this is his whole. He knows them inside and out. And my aunt, she, as I mentioned, used to run a restaurant, so like cooking with her was a very different experience because she's like I remember I was super jet lagged. I had just gotten, at the time she was living in New York, or I guess Jersey for a little bit. But anyways, I went there, and, we just had to hit the ground running and start testing like, 10 recipes a day or something. And had already been cooking like 12 hours. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so tired. I have to sleep. And she's like, what are you talking about? I'm doing great. And I was like, you're literally a professional in a way I simply am not. And I was like, I need a break. I'm tired. I'm jet lagged. But she's like, I can keep going. So yeah, just a really different experience cooking with her. But it was really awesome because yeah, it was just really cool to see like her process and like learn, more about these dishes that she knows to make really well.
That is so cool. That's really exciting to hear about that process. And it seems like there's a lot of really interesting cultural intersectionality between Asian and Latinx foods. And I think of like Chef Roy Choi, who was known for the taco food trucks that introduced people to like the blend of Mexican and Korean fusion dishes and the Korean taco. And here in Tucson, for those that don't know, there's a chef and artist, Fun Fun Yen, and she created the Chinese Chorizo Project, which celebrates Tucson's lost historic food. It originated from Chinese grocery stores here in Tucson that existed a long time ago, where they took like spicy ground pork sausage that was just made from whatever cuts of meat that was on hand and mixed it with Mexican spices. And so the Chinese grocery stores were like a center for community members that brought together Mexican, Indigenous, and African American neighbors. What do you think the future of fusion dishes are? That might be
Mm.
a big loaded question, but
No, first of all, that project sounds super cool and I want to try to eat it. So I love that background and gives me a reason to go to Arizona on another US trip. Um, but I mean, I feel like the future of fusion dishes is sort of just the representation of what the future people of multiple ethnicities are. So like within the US, people of like more than two or more ethnic backgrounds is the fastest growing demographic within people. And it's just, we're taking over is sort of what it feels like. As it, so I feel like with fusion, it's like, it's, it's not just like, oh, I'm going to combine these two things just because like I think they're trendy and they're cool and whatever. It's like, it's just a reflection of like how history is changing and of the people that are a part of it. So, yeah, I mean, for me, I feel like I'm making fusion dishes all the time because I'm like, uh, since I moved to Tokyo, I like constantly crave buffalo wings, which is obviously a very inconvenient place to crave buffalo wings. But I think like as I moved here, just like the further I got from the US, the more like I feel like primal US food taste I crave. And like I never ate buffalo wings that much in the US, but now I'm like every week I'm like, time to try to look for buffalo wings again in Tokyo. But because of like these things, like these flavors that I miss from home, like I'm recreating stuff all the time and changing things up using Japanese ingredients in my own kitchen. And like that's also very much reflected in the book. Like I have a watita recipe, which is like a very traditional peanut butter like stew in Ecuador made with tripe and potatoes, and it's very like velvety and rich and delicious. Uh, and here one, like I like to eat vegetarian often at home also. Because of that, and because I'm just like living here, I ended up swapping tripe with maitake mushrooms because it's just like very prevalent in the grocery store. And it's like when I did that, I'm not thinking I'm going to make a crazy fusion dish. I'm just like, I want these flavors I miss, and I'm just going to use what I have. And so I think that that's also just like part of an evolution of like what fusion means. Just, you know, you're just making do of what your current situation is.
Thank you, Kiera. And we are super excited for the cooking demo. But before we get to that, I want to ask, are there any projects you have in the works that readers and followers can look forward to in 2026 and beyond?
Yeah, uh I'm still doing like recipe writing and different food writing like in Japan. So I'm regularly making restaurant guides for the Infatuation for Tokyo. So that's been like really fun and a great excuse to go out of my little circuit of routine. Also Tokyo is so big that it's like hard to be motivated to go an hour across town every day. But this has been a great excuse to get out of my comfort zone for that kind of thing. And so you can check out like my work for more guides there. I also have like I'm still doing recipe development. I actually just finished a recipe for Filipino spaghetti for Serious Eats, so that should be coming out soon. And for next year, I have my next picture book coming out. So it's called Who the Flan Are You? And it's a history of flan, as I mentioned, going back from like the Roman Empire, but also how flan has spread throughout the world and like what different flan representations looks like across the globe through the lens of a flan looking to learn more about identity. So they meet a time traveling flan machine and it takes them home.
Love that. That sounds wonderful. Thank you so much, Kira, for taking our questions.
And now we can change gears. Would you mind walking us through your Mexican hot chocolate recipe, cookie recipe?
Just pulling up the page so everyone can see what they look like before. So we're making this today. These are my Mexican hot chocolate cookies. When I was thinking about recipes, desserts specifically for the book, I just love cookies, so I just knew I had to have a cookie in it. And I love chocolate, so I was like, okay, 1 + 1 = 2 is sort of how I got to this recipe idea. But I one of like the first things I learned to make was make is like a maybe a strong use of the word was just throwing abuelita chocolate disc into milk and letting it melt and presenting it. But I would also like sometimes try to make it fancy by putting like marshmallows on top and like broiling it so it looks like nice and toasty and throwing a cinnamon stick. And like when I was like 11 and 12, I was like, I am chef was the perspective. Kind of taking that moment to just like remember that culinary experience for me, but also the flavors of a Mexican hot chocolate, you know, super rich in cinnamon and vanilla and spices. Very, of course, I always prefer dark chocolate, so very, very chocolatey in terms of the amount of cocoa used in it. I wanted sort of that experience of like taking a sip of hot chocolate but turning into a cookie form. So this one I'll go over obviously in the demo itself, but it has like a whole tablespoon of ground cinnamon, which sounds like a lot, but the way it like marries perfectly. It actually has equal amounts of cinnamon and vanilla. So it has a whole tablespoon of vanilla extract and a whole tablespoon of cinnamon, along with some other spices. But like those, I think like Mexican hot chocolate is so key with vanilla and cinnamon specifically that like having that like very large presence of both just really help make it very reminiscent of any cup of Mexican hot chocolate that you probably had. So, so yeah, this is what this recipe is, and I hope everyone enjoys it. Should I transition?
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you
cool.
so much.
Yes, I'm gonna just move my laptop over here, so I'm just gonna turn my camera off just for a second as I wobble my laptop that way.
Okay, sounds cool. All right, everyone, just a brief pause while Kiera transitions. I feel like we should be playing music. Just kidding.
I just wish we had some cookies.
Yes, me too.
Yeah, sorry, I don't have
Oh,
cookies.
awesome. Wow, you have an awesome knife set back there.
Yeah, welcome to my knife collection. Okay, well, I have like the mise en place out for the rest of the ingredients, but the first thing we're gonna do for the recipe is brown the butter. So I'm halving the recipe because there will be a TV swap magic moment that happens. So I already did half the recipe last night, but yes. So you need 2 sticks of butter, and this is just 1 stick. Japanese butter doesn't come in traditional sticks, so this is chunks that are here. But you could just use a stick if you're in the US. But yeah, so the reason why I did toasted or brown butter, hopefully you can kind of see that, is it really just helps bring out like a nuttiness to the butter because it's toasting like the milk solids as it's cooking. It's this process happens pretty quickly. You don't even really need, I don't know if you can see, it's like melting already. You don't really need to stir it because that's how the toasting sort of happens. But it just really makes the flavor a lot more deep and tasty. Like I like adding brown butter. Basically, anything that says butter, I'm going to probably add brown butter to it. Is sort of my perspective.
Kira, is
So,
there a trick to keeping the butter from burning?
I mean, it's mostly about heat control. So I like have it on medium right now, but of course every stove is gonna might be a little different. But you can tell really what's going on based off what the butter is doing. So as it's, let's see if I can get a little closer without starting a fire. um, uh, as the butter starts to melt, once it's melted completely, you'll notice it kind of starts foaming up aggressively. So like when you can of course like adjust the heat as you want, but you really want like a steady sort of like rolling boil to happen with the butter. Once you see the foam really start to build, it's still got like a nice knob here, it's trying to melt down. Um, that's when like the magic starts to happen with how it's starting to brown it. And you can also really pay attention to the smell. So like right now it just smells like melted butter, but as it goes on, you start to get like a nuttier and nuttier aroma. So that's also really key to this. And I think also kind of making like you can also right now see how it's starting to foam up. So it's starting to do its thing. But I kind of just do like a little stirring, moving the pot a bit. Yeah, you just want to keep a close eye on it because depending on the size of your pot and um, the amount of butter in it, it of course as it boils up to this high, it could like topple over. So you no fires, please. So you just kind of give it a little mix here. You can just simply do a pan stir without having to dirty up another utensil. But like I can already start to smell that transformation start to happen. So you can see the brown, probably even now a little bit, how it's starting to change color. So yeah, we're basically done. So it probably is reading a little darker because the pan was a little stained before. But if you do it on the slightly underside for brown butter, that's better because the residual heat of the pan will just kind of continue to do its thing. So as soon as that foam starts to like go down, that's when you know time to stop. And once that nuttiness kind of hits. So yes, we got brown butter here.
That's the sign of a true chef or someone who cooks a lot is stained cookware.
Trust me,
So,
I try getting it out, but I'm like, sometimes you're like, this is too much work.
yeah.
I got a little. I'm going to move really quick to the different setup with everything else. So be right back.
Butter before?
Have I browned butter before?
Yeah.
I would say I'm not the best baker, so that's why I asked about burning because I probably don't have the nuanced touch
I've never
to.
browned butter before, so this
Oh,
is something
this is
completely new. This
exciting.
is really
Yeah,
exciting. I'm learning something
we're
new.
learning a lot from you, Kiera, right now, just about browning butter.
Yes, it does take a little bit, but it's mostly about the amount of heat. You can always go like a slightly lower as long as you're seeing it bubble up. That's what like you want to see because that's is cooking enough. Um, so this is a little. Can you see here? Okay, wait.
Yes. Yep,
Okay,
we can see your setup. Very
okay.
cool.
We're gonna have it be rustically set up here. Um, So we have, I already measured out all the ingredients. Like I said, I'm doing half. So that's why you'll see slightly smaller amounts. So we have flour. I just have this little guy for this baking soda and salt, sugar, brown sugar, cocoa powder, um, the cinnamon, egg, and I have the other stuff done here, including some chocolate discs in a whale cup. um, So we're just gonna start off by whisking really quick the dry ingredients. This is gonna help, especially with cocoa powder, can get pretty clumpy. Um, this will help disperse the ingredients evenly without over mixing at the end because once you over mix flour, you're basically working the gluten in it and it just becomes you're adding like working the protein and so it becomes firmer. So you want to do this step beforehand. It's important and also just will make your life easier. So we're just adding the gonna add all the dry ingredients. Obviously you can follow the actual steps to a T, but because they're just already set up here, I'm just gonna dump and stir. Um, and so yeah, adding the cinnamon, adding the cocoa powder and the baking soda and salt. And then I really like using fresh nutmeg. You don't have to use it. You can use dry nutmeg, but I don't know, just in case people aren't familiar with what a nutmeg seed looks like. They're just like a little nuts. Um, and once you start grating it, I don't know if you can tell. It kind of looks like the inside of a brain a little bit. Yes, so this is like a great one I've been grating already. But like fresh nutmeg has such a wonderful scent and so much more like floral notes, like a spicy floral note than you get with dry nutmeg. So like uh or sorry, ground dry nutmeg. So like at the store, a lot of ground seasonings, they can sometimes sit there like for years in terms of like when they were last picked. So I really like the Asperco spices and burlap and barrel spices for like spices that are a lot fresher and like sourced often from like a single source. But because of that, you get like a much more fragrant and very different flavor profile. So yeah, I just have like a microblade here, and then I'll just grate. I mean, I'm really just doing like a little pinch because I'm having the recipe, but grating fresh nutmeg. But it really, I think, makes a big difference, and I definitely recommend it. Um, and yeah, so that's all the dry ingredients here. But we're just gonna give it like a mix until it's all just one color and breaking up those chunks of flour because that will, again, just be less of a headache and avoid a streaky batter at the end or a streaky dough.
And
So,
Kira, has the butter just been kind of warming or?
oh yeah, the butter I left, I
Yeah.
took off the heat and it's just been
Okay.
cooling.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yeah, just like for safety reasons, it's better to like wait a bit till it's cool, which is why I
Oh,
did it
okay.
first. But we're gonna risk it all and do it, mix it a little hot today. Um, but yeah, so now it's just like one even color as you can see with the dry mix. And just gonna move this dry guy out of the way. So, usually if I was like in the US, I would probably use like a stand mixer, but that's really difficult to get in Japan. So today we will be just mixing this by hand, which is totally okay. But we're gonna add the butter, which is probably too hot now, but it's okay. Just add it here. And you can see that it has like it's probably reading a little darker on camera just because of the lighting, but it's a brown color. And then we're just gonna add the sugars to this. So the brown just I just dumped in and the white. Um, I'm just like giving a little stir here. It's not gonna look like a typical creaming sugar situation because you're using melted butter, but you can see it's really like deeply brown because of the brown butter. But it smells super nutty and warm because of the toasting that you did of the butter situation. And the other things, sorry, they'll just be in Japanese because hence the ingredients. But this is vanilla extract and almond extract. And the reason why I like using almond a little bit is obviously you can go a little too hard on almonds sometimes, but a lot of Mexican hot chocolates, not all, but if you buy like a disc, they often have nuts in it. So I think like a little bit of almond really adds a lot of depth and helps like give a unique uh, flavor profile to the cookies that maybe you don't traditionally see. And like I said, vanilla is like absolutely key to add like a ton of. But yes, so we'll just be, um, like I said, it really calls for a tablespoon, but because I'm having the recipe, I'm going to do 1.5 teaspoons for this batter. And then with the almond, I do think it's important to like measure out because I feel like sometimes if you put too much almond, it just reads like more soapy sometimes. So it's good to a little goes a long way,
And
basically. So
if somebody doesn't have almond extract, will the recipe lose a lot if it doesn't have it?
you don't it's not you can definitely skip it. Like I think the biggest thing is the vanilla, but it really does help improve the flavor. So I would like highly recommend it. But also it's I think almond extract is useful for a lot of baking recipes. Like even when I'm making like blueberry muffins or something, like adding a little bit of almond extract really like umps up the taste a lot. So I think it could be useful in a lot of cases. But like I said, a little goes a long way with it. So we're just doing a nice like mix situation, and then I am just gonna put one egg in it. But something I didn't really think about until I started like testing recipes more professionally. Let me just rinse my hand really quick. Is you know how like recipes say, oh, put your egg in at room temperature, and before I would just be like, oh yeah, that's cute, I'm just like not gonna do that and just like use an egg straight out of the fridge. Having an egg at room temperature really does help keep like recipe for this, like the cookies or whatever you're doing, a little bit more fluffier. Because if you have the same sort of temperature, for your egg, especially when you're adding it to a fat component. It's not going to harden the fat as much, and so you're able to incorporate more air into the recipe. So it is really helpful. This one calls for 2 eggs at room temperature. Basically, if you did cold eggs versus warm, room temperature egg, you will end up seeing like a slightly rounder, like a fluffier cookie because of the warm egg. If you use the cold egg, it will be a little bit more flatter. The difference will be like pretty slight. This is probably like only for the food nerds out there, but it is I think just it yields a prettier result. So a small like tip that helps if you're like, oh no, I didn't like leave my egg out for hours before, is like sometimes I'll just get a cup of like hot or warm water and just throw the egg in there at the beginning as I'm doing, prepping the other ingredients. So basically at the end, when you're ready to add the egg, it's not cooked. It's just now it's like warmer. So it will be room temperature by the time you're done. So that can be really helpful.
That is so helpful. I was wondering this whole time why my cookies are so flat.
Yeah, it's
But now I know. Now I know. Thank you, Kiera.
of course, it's the air component in the cookies. So like because I'm doing this by hand, I'm gonna like want to whip it a little more than if I used a mixer. This would be a little easier. But I'm only doing a little bit of egg, so it's not a big deal. But you're just trying to make it so it's like rolls off the whisk, in my case a spatula. I like say so it like looks ribbony. So like basically it should like run nicely off and like look kind of satiny. And as you mix, you'll notice that the color does lighten just slightly because of the air component. But yeah, so you can see it's like running off more smoothly than it was in the beginning. Yeah. So you're basically looking like for that kind of texture. And yes, so at this stage, I'm just gonna take this guy out of the way. You just add your dry ingredients to your wet ingredients. So I'm just gonna dump it. I like to do like sometimes half of it first, just so I can make sure things are evenly mixed. Because it can easily get stuck on the bottom or on the side. So you just want to do a nice stir to incorporate all the ingredients. And since this is mixed about halfway, I'm gonna add the rest of the dry. Oh, room change. So yes, we're adding the rest here.
We didn't
And
want
again,
to lose power.
oh yeah, that's
Yeah.
good, smart move. um, so you can see that it's stirring along here. And because it's about halfway, again, I'm just trying to keep in mind not overworking the batter. You can see there's very much streaks of flour and everything in here too, but it's super fragrant smelling and it just smells like a pot of hot chocolate already.
That's cool. So it's okay if the ingredients aren't 100% incorporated.
At this stage, yes,
Yeah.
because now I will be adding the chocolate. So, trying to help with the lighting. So I'm using chocolate discs, which are really nice. I also use chocolate chips, but you can take chocolate bars and cut them up. But I think the main thing is you really want to use a chocolate that's over 70% cocoa, because you really want it to be richer and darker in flavor. It also will help counter the sweetness of the cookie itself, because if you use a chocolate that's more like a more milk chocolate, it will just be sweeter and you won't get that nice like slight bitterness from the chocolate to help give that nice balance. But one thing that's nice about using discs, or if you cut your own bar of chocolate, you don't even have to use like that fancy of a chocolate to do this, is chocolate chip already has like a coating on the outside to help prevent it from melting. So like, you know, it wants to be a chocolate chip. So it has stuff to stabilizers to make sure it stays as much in that form as it can versus a disc, or if you're using chopped chocolate, it will just melt. So if you really want to get like those kind of more like gourmet pools of chocolate in your cookie, this approach with using disc or chopped chocolate will help achieve that for you. Um, and another thing that's helpful is you can just add a couple if you want, or just reserve a couple of this from the batter. So like a way that like food people make their chocolate chip cookies or other chocolatey cookie things look really nice is they reserve some of them at the end to top off the cookie dough with. So once they like put it on a baking tray, they just will like shove in a couple of the disc or chocolate chunks on top. So as it melts, you get more visible pools of chocolate because of it. So versus just letting, you know, nature do its thing as you scoop out each cookie. So that's just like a small tip if you're like trying to make them look prettier. But yes, as I mentioned, because I'm just trying to be thoughtful of how much I'm mixing the dough, when it's about halfway mixed with the second batch, I'll just add in the chocolate and just, you know, again, just giving it now I want to make sure that it's not streaky. So just, you know, pulling things up from the bottom and stuff like that and getting the size of the bowl really well. So everything's mixed in well. But yes, this is extremely rich, chocolatey dough for sure. Yeah. But because I'm using melted butter, it is a little looser of a dough as well. So here's I'm trying to help with light, sorry. So that's what the dough looks
Yeah,
like.
it looks like fudge. Yeah.
It is very fudgy. So what I recommend at this stage for the recipe is you want to let it chill for 30 minutes. So basically that gives the chance for the flour to hydrate from all the moisture of the butter and things like that, but also will help firm up the butter a bit. Ooh, I was like, I think the chocolate's already melting because the butter was hot. Um, but yes, give the chance of the butter to kind of firm up again. So you'll notice in 30 minutes from now, the dough will look a little different because it's doing its thing. So I've made this dough in advance and it's like helpful. You know, you can just like keep it chilled and get it when you're ready to, you know, do it the night before or something. You can just like throw them on a pan and bake away. But also like this is for all the cookie fans out there, is it's really great to freeze cookie dough pre-shaped. So then you can just plop them onto the pan whenever you want fresh cookies, even if it's just like one or five at a time, whatever your heart's desire. But I've done that with this cookie dough and it can last like months and it's really, really helpful for that when you have a chocolatey craving hit, but also if you just want to impress people that you have over, you're like, oh, you want fresh cookies? No problem. You're prepared. Uh, but yeah, that's the dough. Easy peasy. Oh, we got a streak
Cool.
here.
That's
And
so cool. Yeah.
yes, and I let me put this right here, but I have the cookies ready. So we pretend that we have baked them now. 30 minutes have passed. We have baked sheets of cookies. Oh yeah. Like as I mentioned, this is my tiny oven that I put everything in that does not support a full size sheet pan, but you know, we make do. But then how do I do this to avoid? Oh, there you go.
Wow, those look delicious.
You're the
I
fun.
wish the magic of smell-o-vision would let us
Yeah,
grab those cookies.
those
Here
look
you
amazing.
go.
Yeah, and that plate is very cool.
Oh yeah, thank you. So yeah, you can see I don't know if it's reading on camera, but I put some of those disc at the top, as I mentioned, so you get that nice like kind of pooly effect. And while the cookies are hot, once you take them out, kind of two other small like tips that I do is I bang the tray lightly on the counter because it just helps flatten the cookie and like helps with this like sort of rippling that you might see a little bit just at the end. And then while the cookie is still warm, it's helpful. That's when you put the flaky sea salt, which is totally optional, but it looks nice against like the dark brown of the chocolate, but then also it does help with the balance of sweetness. But you put it at while it's still warm because it helps like adhere to the cookie better. But yes, hopefully this is reading okay on camera.
Yeah, it is.
It looks great. Yeah,
Love that.
looks wonderful.
Thank you. But that's the cookie.
Perfect. Well, I know we're a little bit over time, but are you okay with us taking a couple of questions from the audience at this time? Okay. Alrighty, everyone. If you would like to drop in some questions in the Q&A, now would be a good time, and we'll try to get through a couple. Let's see. Let's see, how do we figure this out? There we go. I don't see any questions at this time, but I know that
No
Nikki
worries.
had a question for you.
Yeah. If no one in the virtual audience has a question. Oh, we have a question. What is one recipe everyone should learn?
Uh, in general, or for the cook, I'm gonna just assume from the cookbook. Um, one recipe everyone should learn from the cookbook. Uh, I'm trying to think of one that's easy enough for you to ask people to learn without having multiple steps. I feel like learning a ceviche is just like really great to have in your back pocket. Like one, it's just such an easy no cook. Well, I do have a shrimp ceviche that does require the tiniest bit of cooking because you're just like quickly dropping in shrimp into hot water just till it's pink. So if you can handle 1 minute of cooking, then I would count. You can count this as mostly a no cook recipe, but shrimp ceviche is such a key one of like the main dishes of Ecuador that it's known for. So Ecuadorian ceviche, well, shrimp ceviche has a little bit of ketchup in the citrus broth mixture, so it adds like this really nice tangy sweetness from the tomato, but also makes it a really beautiful blush color. So I highly recommend that recipe because it's super easy to make, but it's very, very fast and very hearty. So like on summer, or actually just anytime I want ceviche, I'll just make that. It's easy to get the ingredients anywhere around the world. So very accessible to make from literally any place I think on earth, given it's one of the easiest recipes I can make in Japan for myself. But it makes for a great appetizer. You can also serve it with like plantain chips or tostones. So like a great kind of party recipe as well.
Awesome. And I was going to say the garbanzo guisados also is super inexpensive, affordable, and makes a large amount of food, and it's very savory. Um, I guess we have time maybe for one more question. We're getting a lot of accolades. What is your favorite savory recipe in the book?
Uh, favorite savory. Um, it's like asking my favorite child. Probably I don't know. The first thing that came to mind, it's like between pernil and sopes, I think. So pernil is like a Puerto Rican pork shoulder, but many places in Latin America and the Caribbean make it. And it's what my family makes for Thanksgiving. It's definitely like a dish that takes time. Like you have to prepare it overnight or up to 2 days in advance with the marinade. And it does feel like very Hannibal Lecter because you're just like stabbing the pork many times with a knife for basically you're doing that so the marinade can seep into deep into the meat to really like flavor everything. But it does feel like kind of intense. So do it. I always like think just think when you're angry or something, it's like perfect for that. But the after you cook it for a long, very at a slow temperature over a long period of time, you just get really, really tender pork, and the skin gets really nice and crackly. And it's so savory and so delicious, and it's very, very versatile as leftovers. So like you can take that pernil meat. One, it freezes well. You can something my aunt likes to do is I have a really great lentil recipe in the book that is thickened with grated green plantains, which has also been like a very popular recipe in general. And it's vegan, but what she takes is and makes she does it she makes it not vegan by taking that with leftover pernil and frying them together with rice, and it's just absolutely delicious. But pernil makes great sandwiches, put it in tacos, whatever. Yeah, it's the gift that kind of keeps on giving when you make it. And then sopes, people are who are unfamiliar are just like thick masa patties that you indent, so they're kind of like a little pool for whatever you want, pool structure for anything. So my grandma, she puts like refried beans, fried longanisa, tops it with salsa, lettuce, sour cream, and it's just like wonderful and delicious, and like I feel like no one can eat it and wouldn't like it. So that's also a really great one. It's a little bit more like labor intensive because you do have to like take the little masa patties and form them, but they're really great.
That's awesome. Time for one more quick one.
I think this one was really good.
Yeah.
But
Maybe just if we can sort of keep the answer maybe super quick to this one, but do you feel the texture is different if you manually mix the cookie dough versus using a stand mixer?
I think if you put in like enough arm movement, you mix it enough, basically you're just trying to incorporate enough air. Then for a cookie dough, I think you can totally make it by hand. But you just got to make sure you put in a little bit more effort to get that kind of streakiness, as you saw as the dough, as specifically the butter mixture kind of fell off the spatula or whisk. Um, but it totally depends on the recipe because, like, for example, if you're making bread, it's way easier to have a stand mixer. But I do think for cookies, it's pretty forgiving, and you can, as long as you're putting in enough elbow grease, it should be okay.
Cool. Thank you for answering those.
thank you so much, Kiera. We had such a great time salivating over your Mexican hot chocolate cookies. We wish they were here in front of us. And we appreciate you taking the time to talk with us, sharing your knowledge, your writing, your family, your history, and more. We really look forward to your next project. Can you remind us the title of the flan book?
Who the flan am I?
Who the flan am I? Super excited for that.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank
and yeah, and may we ask to take a screenshot of this so we can share on our social media, if that's okay with you?
Yes.
Oh, that's perfect. Okay, now let me figure out how to do a screenshot. I think I remember.
I'm just gonna pose for everyone longer.
Oh, that's perfect.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome, great. We got it.
Okay.
And thank you to everyone who joined in to listen to the discussion. And if you want to read more of Kiera's work, her books are available at the Pima County Library catalog, including the I Want to Be Spaghetti book. And you can find that at www.library.pima.gov.
And don't forget to stay connected with Nuestras Raíces by following us on Instagram at pimalibrary.nr and on Facebook.
And Biblio Lotus is also on Facebook, so please look us up there.
And from Nuestras Raíces
and Biblio Lotus,
we thank you.
Yeah, and everyone have a really great evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kiera.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and thank you everyone for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I hope you enjoyed.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All righty. Bye.
Bye. Thanks.